Every Halloween, my friends and I would go to the old amusement park at the edge of town. It had been abandoned for years, but it was full of ghost stories. People said the Ferris wheel was haunted and even cursed. This year, we decided to face our fears and check it out. As we got closer to the park, the moonlight cast spooky shadows on the rusted rides, and I felt a buzz of excitement in the air. We made our way to the Ferris wheel, its tall frame standing out against the night sky. Climbing into one of the creaky carriages, I felt both excited and scared. The metal groaned under us, and the smell of rust and decay filled the air. When we reached the top, the wind picked up and rattled the carriage. Suddenly, I heard faint laughter coming from nowhere, sending chills down my spine. "Did you guys hear that?" I whispered, looking around in the dark. Just then, the Ferris wheel started turning on its own. Panic set in as we were pulled higher, and I realized we were stuck. My heart raced as I looked down and saw shadows moving. Figures began to appear, people in old-fashioned costumes dancing and twirling as if they were in a trance. Their laughter mixed with the haunting sound of the wind. In the middle of this strange scene, a ghostly figure appeared, a woman in a flowing white dress with wild hair. She pointed at us, her eyes filled with sadness. "Help me," she whispered, her voice cutting through the laughter. Even though I was scared, I felt I had to help her. "How can we help?" I shouted, trying to be heard over the noise. "Find my lost love," she pleaded, her form flickering like a candle flame. "He waits for me." As the Ferris wheel slowly came down, a rush of cold air hit us, and the figures below began to fade. When we finally reached the ground, we knew we had to search the park for clues about the lost souls trapped there. After wandering for hours, we found an old, crumbling gravestone near the entrance. The inscription read, "Here lies Thomas, lost in love." A chill ran through me as I realized this was the key to the woman's sadness. That night, we lit candles around the gravestone, whispering words of comfort. As the flames flickered, the air shimmered, and the woman appeared before us, looking grateful. "Thank you," she said softly as a warm energy surrounded her. In that moment, she was set free, and we felt a wave of warmth wash over us. The park no longer felt sad. It had transformed into a place of love and connection. The laughter of children echoed in the distance, reminding us that love, even when lost, can last through time. One Halloween, I inherited a haunting portrait of my great-grandmother. It was a dark painting that seemed to watch me from the wall of my new apartment. As a kid, I had heard stories about her. Some said she practiced dark magic, while others thought she was just misunderstood. I felt both fascinated and uneasy about having her portrait in my home. As the night went on, the shadows in the room grew deeper, and I felt strangely drawn to the painting. The candlelight flickered, making her eyes seem almost alive. Every time I looked away, I felt a chill, as if something unseen was lurking just behind me. Curiosity eventually took over my fear. I stepped closer to the portrait, my heart racing. When my fingers brushed against the cold frame, the air around me felt thick with tension. Suddenly, I was pulled into a vision. A scene from the past unfolded before my eyes. I found myself in my great-grandmother's parlor, filled with strange trinkets and oddities. I watched her surrounded by candles, her voice rising in an incantation. "Power, come to me," she cried, desperation in her voice as the room shook with energy. Then I saw it, a dark figure emerging from the shadows, towering over her, its eyes glowing with malice. My heart raced as I saw her panic, realizing she had called forth something she couldn't control. The figure reached out, and I felt a jolt of energy shoot through me, echoing her fear. In an instant, I was back in my living room, gasping for breath. The portrait shimmered, and I knew I had to help her. Determined, I started researching her past, trying to uncover the truth about her mysterious life. I learned that the spell she had cast was meant to grant her immortality, but it had trapped her soul inside the painting. With a candle lit and sage in hand, I set up an altar in front of the portrait, reciting the incantation I had found. As I spoke the final words, the air crackled, and the room glowed with a soft light. The portrait shimmered again, and my great-grandmother's face, once filled with despair, now shone with hope. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes filled with gratitude as the energy surrounded her. With a final push, the locket I had found glowed brightly, and the painting shattered, sending a rush of light through the room. The dark figure in the portrait was released, and I felt a weight lift from my chest. The painting transformed into a beautiful reminder of her journey, a legacy of love instead of fear. In my childhood home, there was a long, dark hallway that connected my bedroom to the living room. People said it was haunted by restless spirits, and whispers filled the air, especially on Halloween night. As a kid, I didn't believe the stories, but as the holiday got closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. One stormy night, I lay in bed listening to the rain tapping against the window. Suddenly, I heard the familiar whispers echoing down the hallway, pulling me from sleep. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. All I heard in response was the soft rustling of leaves outside. Curiosity got the better of me, so I grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the hallway. Each step felt like I was jumping into the unknown. As I reached the end, the whispers grew louder and more urgent, echoing in the walls around me. Then the lights flickered, and I was engulfed in darkness. The beam of my flashlight fell on a mirror hanging on the wall. My reflection looked strange and twisted. The whispers changed into a soft, melodic voice. "Help me," it pleaded from within the mirror. I stared in shock, realizing the voice belonged to a young girl trapped inside the glass. "What happened to you?" I asked, trembling. "I was trapped here by the darkness," she said, tears in her eyes. "I need your help to break free." Determined to save her, I remembered a story about a family heirloom, a locket that could cut the ties to the darkness. I rushed to my parents' room and rummaged through old boxes until I found the locket, its surface shining faintly in the dim light. Clutching it tightly, I hurried back to the hallway. As I held the locket up to the mirror, the whispers grew louder, filled with urgency. I recited a prayer my grandmother had taught me, hoping it would work. The mirror shimmered and the girl's reflection became clearer. "Thank you," she exclaimed, her presence growing stronger. With one last push, the locket glowed brightly, and the mirror shattered, sending a rush of light through the hallway. The girl's spirit soared free at last, and I felt a wave of warmth wash over me. From that night on, the hallway felt different, brighter and lighter. I hadn't just freed a lost soul. I had turned my childhood fears into a powerful memory of courage and compassion. In a quiet town surrounded by thick forests, there was a doll maker named Eliza, known for making beautiful dolls. Each doll looked so lifelike with glassy eyes that seemed to follow me as I moved. The people in town admired her talent, but over time, rumors of a curse started to spread. They said Eliza's dolls were not just toys. They held the spirits of lost children trapped inside their porcelain bodies. As Halloween got closer, I felt curious and decided to visit Eliza's shop. The air was filled with the smell of wood shavings and varnish. When I walked in, I saw shelves packed with dolls of all shapes and sizes. Their painted smiles seemed to hide secrets, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching me. "Eliza?" I called out, my voice echoing in the dimly lit shop. She came out from the back, her silver hair flowing down her shoulders like a waterfall. Her eyes sparkled with wisdom, but there was a sadness behind her smile. "A curious visitor," she exclaimed, her voice warm yet haunting. "What brings you to my humble shop?" I hesitated before asking about the curse. When I did, Eliza's expression changed, shadows crossing her face. "Many years ago, I lost my only child, Lily. To cope with my grief, I poured my heart into making dolls, hoping to keep her spirit alive. But in my desperation, I accidentally trapped her essence in one of them." A chill ran down my spine as I listened. Every Halloween, the souls of children who have suffered come to me, seeking refuge. I cannot let them go. They have become part of my work. She pointed to a doll on the shelf, a stunning porcelain figure with bright blue eyes. I felt an odd pull toward it. "That one is special," Eliza said softly. "Lily's spirit is in there, forever watching over me." Just then, a gust of wind rattled the window, and I heard a faint whisper. "Help me, please." It was Lily's voice, soft but full of desperation. The doll's eyes shimmered, almost pleading for release. I was determined to make things right, so I took a deep breath and asked Eliza how I could help. "You must break the curse," she replied, her gaze serious. "But be warned, the spirits are restless and may not want to leave." That night, I returned to the shop with candles, crystals, and a determination I didn't know I had. I set up a small altar in front of the doll and began to chant the incantation Eliza had given me, calling for the spirits to be freed. Suddenly, the room filled with bright light, and I felt a rush of energy around me. The dolls began to shake, their glassy eyes flickering. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of children's voices crying for freedom. With one final shout, the doll in front of me shattered, sending a wave of warmth through the room. I watched in awe as glowing orbs of light floated out, the spirits of the lost children rising to the heavens. Eliza watched too, tears streaming down her cheeks as the burden of her past began to lift. Afterward, the shop felt lighter and the air felt fresh. Eliza hugged me, her gratitude clear. "You freed them," she said, her voice shaky. "Now I can finally let go of my sorrow." From that day on, Eliza's dolls became just toys again, each carrying the memory of a child, but no longer holding their souls. I learned that sometimes facing the past can help not only the lost, but also those who are still living. In my town, there was an old cemetery hidden deep in the woods. It was forgotten and overgrown, and people said it was where those who died under mysterious circumstances rested, their stories lost to time. Every Halloween, a chill filled the air, and the townsfolk warned each other to stay away from the cursed grounds. But my friends and I were curious. One Halloween night, we decided to explore the cemetery. We grabbed our flashlights and bravado and made our way through the thick brush. The moon cast eerie shadows on the ground, and as we ventured deeper, the fog wrapped around us like a blanket. When we reached the cemetery gates, a rusted iron archway loomed above us. The words, "Rest in peace," were barely visible under layers of grime. We pushed the gate open, and it creaked loudly as we stepped inside. Tombstones poked out of the ground at odd angles, and the air felt charged with an eerie energy. "Let's split up and explore," my friend Jake suggested, eager for some adventure. I hesitated, but the idea of exploring alone excited me. I walked down a narrow path, my footsteps muffled by the thick layer of leaves. As I wandered, I felt a strange presence, as if someone was watching me from the shadows. Suddenly, I came across a grave that caught my attention. It was different from the others, intricately carved, depicting a woman in a flowing dress with her hands stretched out, as if reaching for something. The name Clara Hawthorne was etched below, along with the date October 31st, 1887. Intrigued, I knelt beside the grave and brushed away the leaves. Just then, a sudden gust of wind swept through the cemetery, sending chills down my spine. I heard a soft whisper, almost like a song, floating through the air. "Help me! Find me!" My heart raced as I looked around, but I was alone. I called out to my friends, but the fog swallowed my voice. Panic set in, and I turned to leave, but a cold sensation gripped my chest, freezing me in place. Suddenly, the fog thickened, swirling around me until I could barely see. The whispers grew louder, filling my mind with sorrow. "Find me! Help me!" Their cries drowned out all rational thoughts. I remembered the stories about Clara, how she had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, with her body never found. The townsfolk believed she roamed the woods, searching for someone to help her find peace. Gathering my courage, I shouted, "Clara, I'm here to help you!" The whispers stopped, and a heavy silence surrounded me. I felt a cool, gentle presence beside me. "Thank you," a voice echoed softly, a melodic whisper that resonated deep within me. "Please help me find my resting place." Determined, I knelt again and traced the letters of her name. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, feeling a connection I couldn't explain. "Beneath the stone lies my heart," she replied, her words ringing in the stillness. "Release me." With new determination, I began to dig around the grave, my heart racing as I moved the earth with my hands. My friends soon joined me, drawn by the noise. Together we unearthed a small, ornate box covered in dirt. When we opened it, a soft glow filled the air. Inside was a delicate locket with a picture of a young woman smiling back at us, Clara. "This is what you were searching for," I said, holding it up. The air shimmered, and I felt a wave of warmth. Clara's spirit appeared before us, glowing and radiant. "Thank you," she said, her voice now joyful. "You have freed me from my pain." With that, the locket turned to shimmering dust, and Clara's spirit rose into the night sky, leaving a sense of peace in the cemetery. The fog lifted, and the heavy sadness vanished. From that day on, the cemetery was a place of remembrance instead of fear. Clara's story was finally told, and her spirit was free to rest, watching over those who came to find comfort among the graves. In a small village shrouded in fog, there was an old lantern that people said had magical powers. It was rumored that anyone who lit the lantern on Halloween night could talk to spirits from the past. Intrigued by the story, I gathered my friends and suggested we go visit the lantern, which was located at the edge of the woods. As dusk fell, we walked to the lantern spot, surrounded by twisted trees and whispering winds. The lantern looked ancient and rusty, with glass panels that were cloudy with age. We lit it with a match, and a warm glow filled the clearing. As the flame flickered, the air felt heavy, and shadows danced around us. "Do you feel that?" one of my friends asked, looking nervously at the darkening woods. Suddenly, the wind picked up, howling through the trees, and a figure began to appear beside the lantern, a translucent woman in a flowing gown. "Who dares disturb my slumber?" she asked, her voice echoing like a distant bell. My heart raced, but I stepped forward, caught between fear and curiosity. "We mean no harm. We just wanted to learn about the lantern's magic." The woman looked at us, her expression softening. "This lantern is a bridge between worlds. It lets the living connect with the dead. But be careful. Some spirits are not at peace and may seek revenge." We huddled closer, captivated by her story. "Many years ago, I was a healer in this village," she continued, her voice filled with sadness. "I helped those in need, but when a terrible illness swept through, the villagers turned on me, blaming me for their suffering. They lit the lantern in anger, and I was trapped between worlds ever since." "Is there a way to help you?" I asked, feeling a surge of compassion. "You deserve peace." The spirit smiled sadly. "To free me, you must uncover the truth of my death and seek forgiveness for me. Only then will I be released from this lantern's grip." With determination, we set out to gather stories from the villagers about her life. As we ventured deeper into the woods, we met an elderly man who had seen the events unfold decades ago. "She was innocent," he whispered, tears in his eyes. But fear drove them to madness. Armed with this knowledge, we returned to the lantern. "We've talked to those who remember you," I said, my voice steady. "They regret their actions and want to make things right." As I spoke, the lantern flickered violently, and the woman's spirit began to shimmer. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice growing fainter. "You have given me hope. Release me from this earthly bond." With that, the lantern burst into flames, sending a shockwave through the clearing. The spirit swirled around us, her form glowing, and then, with a final flash, she vanished, leaving behind a gentle breeze and a comforting warmth of peace. As we stood in the clearing, the lantern dimmed, but the heaviness of the night lifted. We had not only released a trapped soul, but also formed a connection with the past, forever changing how we understood the village's history. Blackwood Manor had always been the center of local legends. People said that anyone who entered would never come back. Built in the 1800s by a reclusive family, the manor was rumored to be cursed. As Halloween approached, my friends and I decided to spend the night there for an adventure. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow as we arrived. The manor loomed before us, its windows like dark, empty eyes. Taking a deep breath, we pushed open the creaky door, and a chill swept over us. Dust floated in the beams of our flashlights, and the air smelled musty. "Let's find the famous library," Jake suggested, his excitement clear. We climbed the winding staircase to the second floor, the floorboards creaking under our weight. When we entered the library, the smell of old books surrounded us, and we could hardly contain our excitement. But as we explored, the mood changed. Shadows danced on the walls, and the temperature dropped. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. We all paused, straining to listen. A soft, haunting melody drifted through the air. "What is that?" I asked, moving closer to the window. Outside, the moonlight revealed a figure, a woman in white, her long hair flowing like mist. "She's beautiful," Jake murmured, but a knot formed in my stomach. As we watched, the woman turned her gaze toward us, her eyes filled with sadness. "Help me," she whispered softly. "I am trapped." Without thinking, I took a step toward her, but the air grew heavy and the walls seemed to close in. "We should go," Sarah urged, her voice trembling. But I couldn't look away. What do you need? I called out. The family who lived here wronged me, the woman said, her sorrow clear. I was cast aside and forgotten. I seek justice for my fate. Wanting to help her, I asked, what can we do? To free my spirit, you must uncover the truth of my death. Seek the hidden diary of the lady of the house, she urged, her voice echoing in my mind. We set off to search the manor, feeling the weight of the woman's sadness with every step. Finally, we found the diary hidden in a secret compartment behind a bookshelf. When we opened it, the pages revealed a dark story of jealousy, betrayal, and despair. The lady of the house had felt threatened by the woman's beauty, leading to her downfall. Heart racing, I rushed back to the library with the diary in hand. We found your story, I shouted, breathless. The spirit appeared before us again, her eyes shining with tears of gratitude. Thank you, she whispered, her voice filled with relief. Now I can rest. The air shimmered around her, and with one last grateful smile, she vanished, leaving behind a warm light that filled the room. The heavy atmosphere of the manor lifted, and we knew we had freed her spirit. As we left Blackwood Manor, we carried with us a deeper understanding of compassion and justice, a reminder that even the darkest places can hold light if someone is willing to find it. The Whispering Woods were known to be haunted. People talked about lost souls wandering through the trees, their whispers carried by the wind. As Halloween approached, my friends and I decided to camp on the edge of the woods, eager to test our courage. When the sun set, casting a golden light over the forest, we set up our tents. The air was buzzing with excitement, but as darkness fell, an unsettling silence surrounded us. We gathered around the campfire, sharing ghost stories and laughing nervously, but the forest seemed to listen, its trees swaying gently as if alive. Let's venture deeper into the woods, Jake suggested, his eyes sparkling with mischief. We can find the old cabin that's supposed to be haunted. We hesitated, but eventually agreed and set off, our flashlights cutting through the thick darkness. As we walked deeper into the woods, the whispers grew louder. At first they sounded faint, like leaves rustling in the wind, but soon they became distinct voices calling our names. My heart raced. Did you hear that? I whispered, looking around nervously. My friends nodded, fear on their faces. Maybe it's just the wind, Sarah suggested, but I could feel the tension in the air. Suddenly, we stumbled upon the cabin, a rundown building covered in vines and shadows. The door creaked open, revealing an interior filled with dust and cobwebs. Inside, the air felt heavy and foreboding. We shone our flashlights around, illuminating old furniture and broken glass. A chill ran down my spine as the whispers grew louder, swirling around us like a storm. We should leave, I urged, but curiosity kept us rooted in place. As we explored, we found an old journal hidden in a drawer. The pages were filled with frantic notes about a man named William who had once lived there. He wrote about being tormented by the whispers, claiming they were the souls of those who had died in the woods. Help us, find us, the whispers echoed, growing louder as I read. I looked up and my friends were pale, their eyes wide with fear. We need to get out of here, Jake shouted, but just then the cabin door slammed shut, trapping us inside. Panic set in as the whispers grew deafening. You must listen, they cried. We are lost. Help us find peace. I felt a wave of empathy wash over me, and I turned to my friends. What if they're just seeking closure? What do you mean? Sarah asked, her voice trembling with fear. If we can uncover the truth of their deaths, maybe we can help them, I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady. The others exchanged uncertain looks, but reluctantly agreed. For the next hour, we pieced together clues from the journal, uncovering stories of betrayal, loss, and despair. As we read aloud, the whispers softened, replaced by a gentle hum. We learned that William had been betrayed by those he trusted, and his spirit, along with others, was trapped in the woods, seeking justice and peace. Finally, we reached the end of the journal, and I felt a sense of determination. We need to tell their story, I said, looking at my friends. If we can make sure people remember them, maybe they can finally find peace. Just as I finished speaking, the cabin door creaked open. The whispers turned into soft sighs of relief. Thank you, they murmured, fading into the night. We felt a sense of calm wash over us, and the once heavy air felt light and free. We stepped out into the cool night, the moon shining brightly above us. The whispering woods didn't seem so scary anymore. We had faced our fears and helped lost souls find their way. As we walked back to our campsite, I knew that this Halloween would be one we'd never forget. Every year, the small town of Crestwood hosted a carnival that attracted crowds from all around. But as Halloween got closer, the carnival took on a creepy vibe. People said it was cursed, haunted by the spirits of past performers who had disappeared without a trace. Even with the warnings, my friends and I decided to check it out. The atmosphere was electric as we walked in, with bright lights twinkling against the dark sky. The sweet smell of cotton candy mixed with popcorn filled the air, but underneath all the fun, something felt off. We wandered through the attractions, but as we went deeper into the carnival, the laughter and cheers faded away. We found a tent labeled the Haunted House. "Let's go in," Jake said, his eyes shining with excitement. We stepped inside, and the air was thick with dust and a musty smell. Once we were inside, darkness closed in around us. Shadows flickered, and a chill ran down my spine. I could hear whispers of lost souls echoing around us, their sad voices sending shivers through me. "What if we're trapped?" Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. "Just keep moving," I urged, trying to stay calm. As we made our way through the maze of mirrors and illusions, strange figures appeared, their faces twisted in fear and pain. Suddenly, I heard a soft voice behind us. "Help me," it called, making my heart race. We turned to see a ghostly woman in torn carnival clothes. "I need to find my brother. He's lost in the shadows." "Where is he?" I asked, my heart pounding. The woman pointed to a dark corner of the house. "He was taken by the Shadow Man. You must hurry. He can't survive much longer." Determined to help, we pressed on, the air growing colder as we neared the shadows. Each step felt heavier, like the darkness was trying to pull us in. Finally, we found a dimly lit room where a boy sat, terrified and shaking. "Please, help me," he cried, his eyes wide with fear. I reached out to him, and suddenly the shadows twisted and morphed into a scary figure, the Shadow Man. "You shouldn't have come here," it growled, its voice rumbling like thunder. "These souls are mine." But we didn't back down. "We're here to help," I shouted, my voice ringing with courage. "You can't keep them." The shadows flickered, and the woman's spirit appeared, standing next to her brother. "Leave them alone," she cried, her voice powerful. "You can't take them into your darkness." The Shadow Man shrieked in anger, but we held our ground. "You don't control them," I shouted, feeling a rush of strength. With a final burst of light, the Shadow Man vanished, and the room brightened. The spirits of the lost performers emerged, thanking us for our bravery. We led the brother and sister out of the haunted house, their spirits finally at peace. As we exited the carnival, the atmosphere changed. The once cursed grounds felt lighter, and the laughter of children returned as if the shadows had been banished for good. We realized the real magic of the carnival wasn't in the rides, but in the friendships we formed through courage and kindness. Growing up, my town had a Halloween carnival that was famous for being the best in the area. They really went all out. Haunted houses, spooky games, and lots of eerie attractions that drew people from nearby towns. But there was one thing everyone whispered about, the Hall of Mirrors. This attraction had been around forever, and rumors said it was cursed. According to local legend, a girl had disappeared there decades ago, and her body was never found. Some people claimed her spirit was trapped inside, still waiting for someone to help her. I never believed those stories. To me, the carnival was just a fun Halloween event, and the Hall of Mirrors was just another ride. But when I was 16, I decided to check it out for myself. It was late in the evening, and most of the crowd had gone home. I slipped into the Hall of Mirrors, thinking I'd have a good time getting lost in the maze. At first, it was exactly what I expected. Dozens of mirrors reflecting my image back at me, some stretching or twisting, making me look taller, shorter, or just weird. I wandered through the maze, laughing at my funny reflections. But as I went deeper, something strange started to happen. The air became colder, and the reflections in the mirrors looked off. At first, it was subtle, but then I noticed that some of my reflections weren't matching my movements. I turned my head, and in one mirror, I saw my reflection smile. A smile I wasn't making. I stopped laughing. A chill ran down my spine as I stared at one mirror. Slowly, my reflection raised its hand to wave at me, even though my own hand stayed by my side. I backed away, but the reflection didn't move. It just kept waving, its smile growing wider, almost creepy. Panicking, I turned to leave, but the mirrors seemed to shift around me, trapping me in a maze of twisted images. Every reflection was different now. Some looked like me, but others were shadowy figures that flickered in and out of view. I could hear faint whispers echoing through the hall, like voices from far away. I ran, desperate to find the exit, but no matter which way I turned, the mirrors kept stretching on and on. My heart raced as the reflections closed in, their eyes following me, their faces twisted into unnatural grins. Just when I thought I'd never escape, I saw it, a narrow passageway at the end of the hall. I sprinted toward it, not daring to look back. When I burst through the exit, the whispers stopped and the air felt warm again. Breathing heavily, I looked back at the hall of mirrors. It seemed normal from the outside, but I knew something was off, something dark and unnatural. I haven't gone back to the carnival since that night. But every Halloween, I think about the girl who disappeared and wonder if she's still in there, waiting for someone to join her. It was a chilly Halloween night, and I was heading home from a small costume party. The streets were eerily quiet, lit only by the soft glow of jack-o'-lanterns flickering on porches. As I cut through the alley, a black cat darted right in front of me. Startled, I paused and watched as the cat stared back at me with glowing yellow eyes before slipping away into the shadows. I've never been superstitious, but that cat left me feeling uneasy. The rest of the way home, I had this weird feeling like something was following me. I turned around more than once, but there was no one there. Just the wind rustling through the trees and the distant laughter of trick-or-treaters. When I finally got to my apartment, I shut the door behind me and locked it, feeling a strange sense of relief. But that didn't last long. As I was getting ready to relax, I heard a soft scratching sound at the window. I lived on the 3rd floor. There shouldn't be anything scratching at that height. My heart raced as I approached the window, only to find nothing but darkness outside. Then I heard it again, but this time it was coming from the front door. It was slow and deliberate, like claws scraping against wood. I held my breath and listened closely. It couldn't be the cat. It had disappeared down the alley. I cautiously opened the door, but the hallway was empty. I quickly closed it and made sure the lock was secure. As the night went on, the scratching continued, always just out of sight, first at the window, then at the door, then even the walls. It felt like something was trying to get in, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was the black cat. I tried to sleep, but the scratching echoed through the room, relentless and unnerving. At some point, I must have drifted off because I woke up to loud banging on my door. It was morning, and the sun was just starting to rise. Groggy and disoriented, I opened the door to find a neighbor standing there, looking pale and wide-eyed. "Did you hear it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The witch's cat. It was here last night. People say it's cursed, and if it scratches at your door, it's a warning." I didn't know what to say. All I could think about was the black cat, the scratching, and that strange feeling of being watched. The neighbor left, but her words stuck with me. Every Halloween since then, I've avoided walking home through that alley. I haven't seen the black cat again, but sometimes late at night, I still hear scratching at the window. My family had a strange tradition. Every Halloween, we carved a jack-o'-lantern and placed it on the porch. But instead of the usual smiling or grimacing faces, ours always had to be frowning. My grandmother started this tradition years ago, long before I was born. She insisted it wasn't just for decoration, it was a warning. According to her, a long time ago, our family made a deal with something in the woods. No one would tell me exactly what, but the details didn't matter. What mattered was that each year, we had to carve a jack-o'-lantern with a scowling face and leave it on the porch to keep it away. I always thought it was just an old wives' tale, something to scare the kids. But after what happened last year, I'm not so sure anymore. It was the night before Halloween, and I had forgotten to carve the pumpkin. My parents were away for the weekend, and I was home alone. I figured I could do it the next day. It was no big deal. But that night, as I sat in the living room watching TV, I started to hear strange noises outside. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then the knocking started. It was faint at first, like someone tapping on the windows, but it grew louder and more insistent. I checked the front door, nothing. The windows, nothing. But the knocking didn't stop. It moved around the house as if something was circling it, looking for a way in. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside, my heart pounding. The night was still, too still, and the air smelled thick with damp leaves and earth. That's when I saw it, a figure barely visible in the shadows at the edge of the yard, watching me. I froze. It didn't move, just stood there staring. But as I looked closer, I realized it wasn't a person. Its body was twisted, too tall and too thin, and its eyes glowed faintly in the dark. I ran back inside, locking the doors and windows, but the knocking continued, louder now, more urgent. Then I remembered. The jack-o'-lantern. I hadn't carved it. The warning wasn't in place. I scrambled to the kitchen, grabbing the knife and the pumpkin we bought earlier that week. My hands shook as I carved the angry face, the knife slipping more than once. I placed the finished jack-o'-lantern on the porch, hoping, praying it would work. The knocking stopped. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the jack-o'-lantern flicker in the dark. The figure never returned, but I knew it was out there, waiting. The next morning, I found the pumpkin smashed, pieces scattered across the porch. But I was alive, and that was all that mattered. Now every year, I carve the angriest jack-o'-lantern I can, just like my grandmother did, because I know the deal isn't over. It never will be. It was October 31st, and the harvest moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the fields around our small town. I've always loved Halloween, but that year felt different, darker. The air was heavy and the town was quiet, like everyone was holding their breath. My friends and I had heard rumors about a haunted field just outside of town. It wasn't the usual ghost story. This one was worse. They said the field had been cursed centuries ago when the town was founded. Back then, settlers had angered a local witch by accusing her of poisoning the crops. In retaliation, she cursed the land, vowing that anyone who entered on the night of the harvest moon would never return. It sounded like just another scary story, but curiosity got the better of us. We were teenagers after all, and the idea of facing something truly terrifying was too tempting to resist. Around 11 p.m., we set out, a group of 6. Armed with flashlights and a couple of flimsy charms for protection, we made our way through the dark streets toward the field. The closer we got, the more uneasy I felt, like something was pulling at my chest, warning me to turn back. But I couldn't show fear in front of my friends. The field was surrounded by a crumbling stone wall, covered in ivy and weeds. The old gate hung open just enough for us to slip through. As we stepped inside, I noticed how cold it was, far colder than it should have been for late October. The field stretched out endlessly in the dim light, tall, dry stalks of corn rustling in the wind. We ventured in, laughing nervously and daring each other to go further. But the deeper we went, the more unsettling it became. The wind seemed to die down, and the corn stalks, which had been swaying gently, now stood unnaturally still. Before long, we lost sight of the entrance. We tried to retrace our steps, but no matter which way we turned, the field seemed to stretch on forever. Panic set in. The moonlight, once bright, seemed to dim, casting long, distorted shadows across the ground. That's when we heard it, a low, rhythmic whisper, like chanting. At first, it was faint, but it grew louder and closer. We huddled together, swinging our flashlights wildly, trying to find the source. But the sound seemed to come from everywhere, as if the field itself was alive, whispering its ancient curse. Suddenly, one of my friends screamed, pointing ahead. At the edge of our light, we saw figures barely visible in the mist rising from the ground. They stood still, their faces hidden, but I could feel their eyes on us, watching and waiting. We ran, but the field wouldn't let us go. The corn stalks closed in around us, blocking our path. The chanting grew louder, and the figures moved closer. Every time we turned, they were there, guiding us towards something worse than the curse. Out of nowhere, we stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood an old, twisted tree, its branches bare and gnarled, reaching toward the sky like skeletal hands. At its base was a cracked stone altar with strange symbols carved into it. The chanting stopped. For a moment, everything was still. Then, from the shadows, the witch appeared. She was old, her face gaunt and hollow, her eyes black as the night around us. She smiled, a twisted grin that sent chills down my spine, and without a word she raised her hand. I don't know what happened next. All I remember is the cold, the suffocating darkness, and the feeling of being pulled away from the world. When I woke up, it was morning, and I was lying at the edge of the field alone. The others, they were gone. No one believes me when I tell the story. They think it's just another Halloween prank gone wrong. But I know the truth. The field took them just like the legend said. And every year when the harvest moon rises, I hear the chanting again, calling me back. There's something really creepy about old cemeteries, especially the forgotten one at the edge of my town. Growing up, it felt like a local legend, a place no one dared to visit after dark. This cemetery had been abandoned for over 100 years. The headstones were faded and crooked, swallowed by time and nature. According to the story, back in the late 1800s, a crypt was built for the wealthy Mercer family. But soon after, they all disappeared without a trace, leaving only their mausoleum behind. Some said it was cursed. Last Halloween, I made the mistake of going there with a few friends. I thought it was all just spooky tales. It was Aaron's idea, of course. He always got us into trouble. "It's just a graveyard," he said, waving his flashlight like it could scare away ghosts. What could go wrong? We got to the gates just before midnight. They were rusty and falling apart, creaking as we pushed them open. Beyond the gate was a twisted path with broken stones and gnarled trees. The wind howled through the branches, but no one mentioned how strange it sounded, like the trees were whispering warnings we couldn't hear. The Mercer crypt was at the far end, covered in vines and ivy, standing apart from the other graves like a king watching over his subjects. As we walked closer, the air felt heavier and colder. It was like something was pressing down on my chest, making it hard to move. But Aaron kept going, and we all followed, too stubborn to turn back. The crypt door was heavy and made of solid stone, but it wasn't locked. With a loud grating sound, Aaron pushed it open, revealing a cold, dark inside. The air was stale and smelled of mold. A staircase led down into the darkness, and without thinking, Aaron started going down. "You coming?" he called, his voice echoing eerily in the small space. Reluctantly, we followed him. The descent felt like it would never end, like the steps stretched out further with each one we took. At the bottom, we entered a large chamber. The walls were lined with stone coffins, each marked with a name from the Mercer family. But something was wrong. Each coffin was broken open, some cracked or completely shattered. Inside, they were empty. A chill ran down my spine. "Where are the bodies?" someone whispered, but no one answered. We all knew it didn't matter. Something unnatural had happened there. Of course, Aaron wanted to explore more. In the far corner of the chamber, there was a narrow passage, barely visible in the dim light. He squeezed through it, flashlight in hand, and we had no choice but to follow him. The passage led to another small chamber, and there in the center was an old stone altar covered in dust and cobwebs. "Look at this," Aaron said, shining his light on the altar. "It's like some kind of ritual site." He was right. The altar had strange symbols carved into it, symbols that didn't belong in any church or cemetery. As we approached, I felt a cold breeze, even though we were deep underground. Then something moved. At first, it was just a shadow, something in the corner of my eye. I turned, but there was nothing there. Aaron laughed nervously. "This place is messing with us," he said, but he didn't sound confident anymore. "Let's get out of here." But when we turned to leave, the passageway was gone. In its place was solid stone, like the walls had shifted when we weren't looking. Panic set in. We scrambled around the chamber, searching for any sign of the exit, but it was gone. Aaron's flashlight flickered and then died, plunging us into darkness. Someone screamed, I don't know who. Maybe it was me. But in the blackness, I felt something cold brush against my arm, something that wasn't one of my friends. We huddled together, breathing heavily, trying to stay calm. Then the whispering started. At first, it was faint, like the wind through the trees, but soon it grew louder, more distinct. Voices, many voices, chanting something in a language I couldn't understand. The air grew even colder, and then we saw them. Figures, barely visible in the dark, standing around us and watching. Their eyes glowed faintly, and I could feel their gaze burning into me. They moved slowly, circling us, their whispers getting louder until they were deafening. Aaron was the first to break. He bolted, running toward the altar as if it could protect him. But as he reached it, the figure surged forward, and then he was gone. No scream, no struggle, just gone, swallowed by the darkness. We ran. I don't know how, but we found a passage, maybe a different one. We ran without looking back, and somehow we got out of the crypt. The cold night air hit my face like a slap, and when I turned, the crypt door was sealed shut, like it had never opened. Aaron never came back. We searched, the police searched, but they found nothing. Just like the Mercer family, he had vanished without a trace. Now every Halloween I hear those whispers again. When the wind blows just right, they call to me, reminding me of the crypt and what we found there. But I'll never go back. I can't, because deep down I know Aaron's still there, waiting. Years ago, there was a big house on Hollow Hill that cast a dark shadow over the town below. People whispered about the manor, saying it looked alive, like it was watching and waiting for someone to enter. It had been empty for decades after the wealthy Hollow family vanished one Halloween night in 1925, leaving behind only rumors and a locked door. I didn't believe the stories at all. I thought they were just old tales made up over time. But when my friend Aaron dared me to spend the night there on Halloween, I agreed. It seemed like a great way to prove him wrong and finally shut everyone up about the so-called haunted house. We got there just as the sun was setting. The house towered over us, its dark windows empty like a skull's eyes. Aaron was supposed to stay with me, but he got scared the moment we reached the gate. "I'll wait outside," he said, laughing nervously, "just in case you need saving." I rolled my eyes and pushed open the iron gate. It creaked loudly, like it hadn't been moved in years. I stepped inside, and the air felt thick and heavy. As I walked along the cobblestone path to the front door, my flashlight flickered. I cursed under my breath, shaking it until the light stayed on. Inside, the house was quiet. No wind, no birds, nothing. The front door opened easily, almost inviting me in. Once I stepped inside, things started to feel strange. The temperature dropped suddenly. I could see my breath in little white puffs, even though it was a mild October night. The air smelled musty, like old wood and mildew, but there was something else too, something metallic, like rust or blood. The foyer was grand but empty. A big staircase led up to the second floor, and I could see doors on either side, likely to the living rooms and dining areas. I took a deep breath and moved forward, telling myself there was nothing to fear. The floor creaked with every step I took, each sound echoing in the silence. I made my way to the staircase and shone my flashlight into the darkness. Halfway up, I heard something, a faint whisper. I froze and listened. At first, I thought it was the wind, but there was no wind. The whispering grew louder, but I couldn't make out the words. They were too soft and seemed to come from all directions at once. My skin prickled, and a strong urge to leave washed over me, but pride kept me moving. I reached the top of the stairs, my hands shaking as I gripped the flashlight. The upstairs hallway was long, with several closed doors. The whispering was louder now, coming from behind one of them. I stepped toward the first door and hesitated. The air felt electric, making my teeth chatter. I opened the door slowly. Inside was just a dusty room, empty except for an old chair in the corner. But then I saw it, shadows moving in the corners of the room, like the darkness itself was alive and watching me. My flashlight flickered again, and in that brief moment of darkness, I heard the door creak open behind me. I spun around, shining my light down the hall. The door at the far end was open now, and the whispering was coming from there, louder than before. My heart raced, but I couldn't stop myself from walking toward it. As I stepped through the threshold, I saw a figure standing in the middle of the room, facing away from me. It was tall, barely visible in the dim light, but I knew it wasn't human. I felt a deep, unnatural fear in my bones. I stepped back, my breath quickening, but the figure turned slowly, as if it sensed my fear. Its face, or lack of one, was pale and featureless, and the feeling of being watched grew stronger. It moved toward me, gliding silently across the floor, and I turned to run. My feet pounded against the floor as I sprinted back down the hall, my heart racing. As I reached the stairs, I felt a cold hand wrap around my ankle, pulling me back. I screamed and kicked wildly, and the grip loosened just enough for me to break free. I tumbled down the stairs, landing hard on my side, but I didn't stop. I scrambled to my feet and bolted for the door, throwing it open and stumbling outside into the night air. Aaron was gone. I called for him, but there was no answer. The house stood silently behind me, but I could still feel its presence, watching and waiting. I ran for the gate, my legs aching and my breath ragged. When I reached it, I collapsed on the ground. I never saw Aaron again. The police searched the grounds, but found nothing. No sign of him or anyone else. But I know the truth, he didn't leave. The house took him, just like it almost took me, and it's still there, waiting for its next victim. In a small village, there was a spooky tradition on Halloween night called the Ritual of Shadows. The villagers believed that this ritual would protect them from evil spirits. I was always curious about this story, so I decided to see it for myself. As the sun set, everyone gathered around a big bonfire. They started chanting in an old language. The flames flickered, creating shadows that moved as if they were alive. I felt both excited and scared when the village elder came forward with a ceremonial dagger. "Tonight, we summon the shadows to protect our home," he said, his voice loud in the quiet night. I watched as the villagers held hands, forming a circle around the fire. The elder began to chant, and the flames grew higher, lighting up their faces. As the ritual continued, a thick fog rolled in, covering the clearing. The air felt heavy, and I had a strange feeling in my stomach. I could hear whispers in the wind, eerie voices that seemed to join in with the villagers' chant. I looked around, unsure of what would happen next. Suddenly, a dark figure appeared in the mist, its eyes glowing. My heart raced with fear as I realized it was a spirit drawn to the ritual. The villagers kept chanting, but I could tell they were scared too. The elder raised the dagger, ready for the next part of the ritual. "By the power of shadows, we banish you," he shouted, stabbing the dagger into the ground. The spirit let out a terrifying wail, and the ground shook beneath us. I felt a strange energy in the air, as if reality itself was changing. Just as the spirit lunged toward the villagers, I acted on instinct. "No!" I shouted, stepping forward. "This isn't the way." The elder looked at me in surprise, but I could see his fear. "We can't fight like this," I insisted. "We need to understand it." With my heart pounding, I spoke to the spirit, trying to sound calm, even though I was scared. "We mean you no harm. We just want to protect our home, not fight." The spirit paused, its glowing eyes flickering with confusion. The villagers went quiet, staring at me with uncertainty. "Listen to its pain," I urged, realizing that this spirit wasn't evil. It was a lost soul looking for peace. "Help us understand." The spirit's shape started to change, showing a face filled with sadness. "I was wronged," it whispered, its voice echoing in the night. "I want justice for what was taken from me." In that moment, I understood. "Then let us help you find it," I said, my voice strong. The villagers exchanged looks, and the elder nodded slowly. Together, we listened to the spirit's story and promised to seek justice for it. As we chanted, the air around us changed, and the spirit began to glow with warmth instead of anger. With a final breath, the spirit smiled, and a wave of light spread through the clearing. "Thank you," it whispered, fading into the night. The fog cleared, and the villagers stood in silence, realizing what had just happened. We had changed the ritual of shadows into a moment of understanding and compassion. The village was no longer filled with fear, but had embraced the truth of the shadows, finding strength in coming together. In a small town, there was an old manor that had been empty for many years. People said that a portrait of a woman hung in the parlor, and anyone who looked into her eyes would be cursed. I was curious about this story, so I decided to explore the manor on Halloween night, even though the locals warned me not to. When I stepped inside, the air turned cold, and dust danced in the flickering candlelight. Cobwebs stuck to the walls, and everything was silent. I made my way to the parlor, where the portrait hung above the fireplace. The woman's eyes seemed to follow me, filled with sadness. I couldn't resist getting closer. Her face was hauntingly beautiful, and her expression was full of sorrow. I felt drawn to her, as if she was inviting me. What secrets do you hold? I whispered. Suddenly, a gust of wind rushed through the room, blowing out the candles and throwing me into darkness. I stumbled back, my heart racing, as a chill wrapped around me. I heard a voice in the shadows say, "You shouldn't have come here." Panic hit me, and when I tried to escape, the door slammed shut, trapping me inside. The air grew heavy, and I could hear the woman's voice in my mind. "Release me," she begged. "I am trapped in this portrait, cursed by the one who wronged me." I felt a wave of empathy and curiosity. "How can I help you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Find the key hidden in this manor," she whispered. "Only then can I be free." Determined to help, I searched every room for any sign of the key. I opened hidden compartments and dust-covered books, uncovering pieces of the woman's tragic story. Hours passed, and just when I thought I wouldn't find it, I discovered an old dusty journal. Inside, it told of a love gone wrong, betrayal, and a curse from a vengeful spirit. The last entry mentioned that the key was hidden behind the portrait itself. I rushed back to the parlor and started prying at the edges of the frame. My heart raced when I found a small key tucked away, covered in dust and cobwebs. With shaking hands, I took it and returned to the portrait. "I found the key!" I shouted, feeling a rush of hope. "Use it to unlock my heart," the woman's voice echoed, full of urgency. I inserted the key into a tiny lock at the bottom of the frame and turned it. The room lit up with a bright light, and the portrait began to shimmer. With one last breath, the woman stepped out of the frame, her figure glowing. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of gratitude. "You have freed me from my torment." The air shimmered as the curse lifted, and the sadness that hung over the manor faded away. As the first light of dawn came into the room, the woman smiled one last time before disappearing, leaving behind a peaceful feeling. The manor, once filled with despair, became a serene place, and I walked away knowing I had set a troubled soul free. Ravenswood Cemetery was known for being spooky and had many stories about ghosts. As a kid, I heard tales about a witch buried there, said to curse anyone who disturbed her grave. Now, as an adult, I felt pulled to visit the cemetery on Halloween night, wanting to face the legends that had haunted me as a child. The moon was bright, casting a strange glow over the gravestones. Mist hung in the air, and the trees looked tall and creepy, swaying in the cold breeze. My heart raced as I stepped through the iron gate. Each crunch of leaves under my feet echoed in the quiet. I walked among the headstones, shining my flashlight on the names carved into the stone. The whispers of the past seemed to linger in the air, almost like I could hear their stories. When I got closer to the witch's grave, a chill ran down my back. The stone was old and covered in moss, but the words were clear. "Here lies Eliza Blackwood, a witch of Ravenswood." I wanted to pay my respects and learn more about her, so I knelt by the grave. "Eliza," I said softly, "I'm here to honor your memory." As I placed a small bouquet of wildflowers on her headstone, a sudden gust of wind blew around me, rustling the leaves and sending shivers through my body. In that moment, I saw shadows moving out of the corner of my eye, and a low whisper filled the air. "Leave this place," it warned, chilling me to the bone. I looked around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. The cemetery was empty. Ignoring the warning, I decided to dig deeper into the legend. I learned that Eliza had been accused of witchcraft by the townsfolk, which led to her execution. Her spirit was filled with anger and sadness, and the curse she placed on Ravenswood Cemetery was her way of seeking justice. On Halloween night, when the barrier between worlds was thinnest, I returned to confront the curse. I gathered candles and herbs, ready to perform a ritual to appease Eliza's spirit. As I sat up in front of her grave, I felt the air become heavier. With the candles lit and the atmosphere charged with energy, I began the ritual. "Eliza Blackwood," I called, trying to sound brave even though I was scared. "I want to understand your pain. I come in peace." The wind howled, and the shadows seemed to close in around me. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the darkness, a woman in shadow, her eyes glowing like fire. "Why have you disturbed my rest?" she demanded, her voice full of anger and sadness. I stood firm, heart racing. "I've come to honor you and break the curse." The air crackled as Eliza's spirit got closer, her face showing both fury and sadness. "You think you can undo what has been done?" she hissed. I felt her pain, the injustices she had faced. "I can help you find peace," I said. Tension filled the air as I poured my heart into my words, telling her story of betrayal and loss. I begged her to let go of the curse and find comfort in the afterlife. As I spoke, the wind grew stronger and the ground shook beneath me. "Do you really want to help?" Eliza asked, her voice softening. "Yes," I replied, tears streaming down my face. "You deserve to rest." With each word, the shadows began to pull back, and a sense of calm washed over the cemetery. Eliza's anger faded, replaced by sorrow. "Then show me," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. I took a deep breath, focusing my energy on the grave, sending all my love and compassion toward her. "You are free to go," I urged. The atmosphere shifted again, and I felt a warm light surrounding the grave. Eliza's figure began to shimmer, her features softening. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now filled with gratitude. "You've released me from my pain." With that, she vanished into the light, leaving a peaceful feeling in the cemetery. The curse was broken, and the whispers that once haunted Ravenswood Cemetery were replaced by a soothing silence. As I left the cemetery, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, knowing I had helped a restless spirit find her peace. Deep in a dense forest called the Whispering Woods, villagers often talked about strange things happening there. People who ventured too far claimed they heard voices calling their names and saw shadows moving between the trees. Curious about these stories, I decided to explore the woods myself on Halloween night, when the barrier between worlds was said to be thinnest. As I entered the forest, a cold breeze swept through the trees, making the leaves rustle in a spooky way. The path twisted and turned, taking me deeper into the dark woods. The sun set behind the horizon, casting eerie shadows that danced on the ground. I felt both excited and scared, my heart pounding in my chest. With each step, the whispers grew louder, wrapping around me like a haunting song. "Help us," they seemed to say, sending shivers down my spine. I called out, "Is anyone there?" But only silence answered. I kept going, determined to find out where the voices were coming from. Suddenly, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned to see a pale figure in the distance, barely visible in the moonlight. It was a young girl with long hair, wearing a tattered dress. "Help me find my way home," she whispered, her voice soft and almost lost in the rustling leaves. Something about her sad gaze pulled me in, and I felt the urge to follow her deeper into the woods. "What happened to you?" I asked, but she just shook her head, looking even sadder. As we walked, the woods changed around us. The trees seemed to close in, their twisted branches reaching out like fingers. The whispers grew louder, and I started to feel a sense of panic. I looked back and realized I had lost my way. The path I had taken was gone. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice trembling. The girl turned to me, her eyes full of haunting sadness. "You must help me," she urged, pointing to a clearing ahead. As we approached, the air felt heavy with tension. In the center of the clearing was a crumbling stone altar, covered in vines and surrounded by flickering candles. I felt drawn to it, wanting to uncover its secrets. The girl faded into the shadows, and the whispers grew louder, drowning out my thoughts. "Help us! Free us!" they cried. Realizing that the altar was at the center of the haunting, I examined it closely. Carvings of tormented faces covered the stones, and I understood that it had once been a place of sacrifice. The villagers had used it to appease the spirits of the woods, but something had gone wrong. Determined to break the curse, I knelt before the altar and placed my hands on its cold surface. "I release you," I said, focusing my energy into the stones. The whispers became a whirlwind around me. I closed my eyes, channeling my energy into the woods, hoping to restore peace. Suddenly, the girl appeared again, but her expression was different. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice like a soft breeze. "You freed us." As her words echoed in the clearing, the atmosphere changed. The shadows retreated, and the whispers turned into a gentle song. In that moment, I felt the weight of the woods lift. The girl smiled, her form shimmering before disappearing completely. I opened my eyes and found myself alone in the clearing, the moonlight shining down on the path back home. Long after that night, villagers continued to speak about the Whispering Woods, but I knew the truth. The spirits had found peace because of one act of kindness. I left the forest feeling calm and forever changed by the experience, with the whispers that once haunted the woods replaced by a peaceful silence. In a forgotten town, there was a small shop called the Dollmaker's Haven. It looked ordinary from the outside, but inside it was filled with dolls of all shapes and sizes. People in town whispered about the dollmaker, Mr. Whitaker, who was said to be a bit of a mystery. They said he had a special talent for making dolls that looked so lifelike they seemed almost real. One autumn evening, I decided to visit the shop, feeling both curious and a little nervous. As soon as I stepped inside, a bell chimed, and the air smelled of varnish and old wood. Rows of dolls lined the shelves, their glassy eyes appearing to watch me closely. A chill ran down my spine, but my curiosity pushed me to explore further. Mr. Whitaker appeared from the back room. He was an old man with wild white hair and sparkling eyes that seemed to hold secrets. "Ah, a visitor," he said, his gravelly voice warm. "Welcome to my humble shop." He encouraged me to look around, and I couldn't help but check out the dolls up close. As I walked through the aisles, one doll caught my eye. She was a porcelain figure with beautiful features and a beautifully made dress. There was something about her that was almost alive. "Ah, Clara," Mr. Whitaker said when he saw my interest. "She's my finest creation. Many say she's cursed." "Cursed?" I repeated, feeling intrigued. He leaned closer and whispered, "Years ago, I put a piece of my soul into her to bring her to life. Since then, strange things have happened. People who own her often face misfortune." Despite my unease, I bought Clara, convinced I could break the curse. That night, I placed her on a shelf in my room, admiring her beauty. But as I lay in bed, I felt something unsettling lurking in the shadows. I tried to shake it off as just my imagination and closed my eyes, hoping to get some sleep. Days turned into weeks, and as I included Clara in my daily life, strange things began to happen. My dreams were filled with visions of the doll, her eyes shining in the dark as if she was calling me closer. I often woke up to find things in my room moved or misplaced, and the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Determined to find out what was happening, I decided to return to Mr. Whitaker's shop. On the edge of a quiet town stood Maplewood Manor, a big old house full of stories and rumors. People around town talked about strange things happening there: flickering lights at night, cold spots in the hallways, and ghostly figures seen through the windows. When I inherited the manor from my uncle who passed away, I was determined to find out the truth about its spooky reputation. When I first arrived, the manor looked imposing with its grand design, and the gardens were overgrown. Even though I felt a bit scared, I was drawn to the entrance. The air smelled musty, and when I stepped inside, it was so quiet it felt alive. The first few nights were normal, but soon weird things started happening. I heard footsteps in the halls when I was alone, and whispers floated through the air, but I could never understand the words. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. But on Halloween night, everything changed. I decided to host a small gathering to keep the loneliness at bay. My childhood friends came over, drawn by memories and curiosity. As we shared stories and laughed, the mood lightened, hiding the unease that was still there. When the clock struck midnight, the lights began to flicker. Our laughter stopped, and a chill swept through the room. Sarah, one of my friends, suggested we tell ghost stories, which sent a shiver down my spine. Everyone agreed, and we gathered around the fireplace, the flames casting moving shadows on the walls. As we took turns sharing stories, I felt I should tell the tale of Maplewood Manor. I explained how the original owner, a woman named Eliza, had vanished one stormy night. People said her spirit roamed the halls, searching for her lost love. As I spoke, the room grew colder and the flames flickered wildly. Suddenly, a loud crash came from upstairs, freezing us all in place. My heart raced, and we exchanged worried looks. "What was that?" Jake asked, his voice shaky. "Probably just the wind," I replied, though I wasn't sure. Curiosity got the best of us, and we decided to investigate. Armed with flashlights, we climbed the creaky stairs, each step echoing in the stillness. On the second floor, we found a door slightly open, darkness calling us in. I pushed it open, revealing a dusty room full of forgotten memories. In the center stood an old mirror, cloudy and fancy. As we moved closer, the air felt charged. Sarah leaned in and gasped, pointing at the reflection. "Look!" she cried. We turned to see a ghostly woman in a white gown behind us, her face twisted in sorrow. My heart dropped. This was Eliza. "Help me," she whispered, her voice echoing in the room. Panic hit us, and we stepped back, trying to understand what we had just seen. Feeling determined to find out more, I reached for the mirror, my fingers trembling against the glass. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice shaky. The reflection flickered, and Eliza's sad eyes locked onto mine. "Find him," she begged before vanishing completely. We stood there, stunned by what we had seen. It became clear that the legend was real. Eliza's spirit was trapped in the manor, longing for something lost. I knew I had to uncover the truth. Over the next few days, I dug into Old Town records and newspapers. I discovered that Eliza's lover, an artist named Samuel, had also disappeared the same night she did. The more I learned, the clearer the story became. On Halloween night, I went back to the manor, ready to act on what I had discovered. I gathered my friends again to help me hold a seance, hoping to communicate with Eliza and find out what happened to Samuel. We lit candles in the living room, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows. As we joined hands, the air thickened with anticipation. "Eliza," I called, trying to sound brave. "We're here to help you." A gust of wind rushed through the room, snuffing out the candles. "Show yourself," I urged, my voice rising. The temperature dropped, and then Eliza appeared, looking hopeful yet desperate. "You've come," she said. "You must find Samuel." We asked her questions, piecing together what had happened. Eliza revealed that they had planned to run away together, but a tragic accident had kept them apart. With each detail, the energy in the room grew stronger. "Please help me find him," she pleaded, tears in her eyes. Motivated by her pain, I researched where Samuel was last seen. My friends and I went to the old mill where he had disappeared. The air felt heavy as we approached the crumbling building. Inside, we found his artwork, paintings of Eliza in different poses, each one showing his love for her. In the depths of the mill, we discovered a hidden compartment under the floorboards. Inside was Samuel's old journal, filled with sketches and letters to Eliza. One entry read, "I'll never forget you, even if the world tries to tear us apart." With this new information, I returned to the manor, eager to reunite the two spirits. That night, under the full moon, we held one last seance. Eliza appeared, her spirit shining with hope. "You found him," she exclaimed. I held out the journal to her, my hands shaking. "This is for you," I said, tears running down my cheeks. Eliza took the journal, and her form brightened. "Thank you," she whispered before fading into the light. In the days after, Maplewood Manor felt different. The heavy energy lifted, replaced by peace. I sensed Eliza and Samuel's love around me, a reminder that some spirits just want closure. As I prepared to leave the manor, I knew their story would live on, not as a haunting, but as a beautiful reminder of love that transcends time. My grandmother's house was full of old furniture and family treasures, each item telling its own story. But there was one thing that always made me uneasy, a big portrait of a woman in Victorian clothes. Her eyes seemed to follow me, and I felt a chill whenever I walked past it. One Halloween, while my family gathered for a party, I decided to explore the attic. I hoped to find some hidden treasures among the dusty boxes. As I looked through old toys and clothes, I found a small, worn-out journal. It was my grandmother's, filled with stories about her childhood, full of fun and mischief. One entry caught my eye. Dated October 31st, 1955, it described a party my grandmother had thrown for her friends. They laughed and played games until midnight, when the mood changed. Someone suggested they play a game involving the portrait. Curious, I turned the page and found instructions for a ritual with the painting. It said if you looked at the portrait long enough and whispered the name of the woman, you could talk to her spirit. My heart raced at the idea of trying this spooky tradition. That evening, I invited my friends over for a Halloween sleepover, excited to share what I found. We made a cozy spot in the living room, with flickering candles casting shadows on the walls. As I told them the story, they exchanged nervous looks. "Let's do it," Sarah suggested, her eyes shining with excitement. We all agreed to try the ritual. Feeling a mix of fear and excitement, we approached the dusty portrait. The woman in the painting seemed to smile as the candlelight flickered. We formed a circle around the painting and held hands. "What's her name?" Jake asked, looking at the journal. It doesn't say, I replied, feeling a bit scared. Let's just call her Madeline. Taking a deep breath, we focused on the portrait. Madeline, we whispered together, staring into her eyes. The air became colder and I shivered. After saying her name a few times, the atmosphere changed, and I heard a soft whisper. Help me, it said, making my heart race. We looked at each other, terrified. Did you hear that? Sarah asked, her voice shaky. Before I could answer, the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. Panic set in as we scrambled for our phones to light up the room. What's going on? Jake yelled, trembling. Suddenly, the portrait changed. The woman's eyes glowed, and a faint image of her appeared, looking sad and desperate. You must free me, she whispered. I am trapped between worlds. Even though I was scared, I felt I had to help. How can we free you? I asked, my heart racing. She pointed to the journal, and I quickly flipped through the pages, looking for clues. Find the locket, she said, her voice fading. It holds the key to my release. The room grew cold, and I felt a strong urgency. Where is it? I asked, feeling panicked. In the attic, she replied, her image flickering. Hurry. Without thinking, I ran upstairs and my friends followed closely. We searched through the boxes, feeling desperate. The attic was dim, and the shadows seemed alive, watching us. Finally, I saw a small jewelry box tucked away in a corner. My hands shook as I opened it, revealing a delicate locket, old and tarnished. As I held it up, the air became warmer, and the whispers faded. We rushed back to the living room, where Madeline's image flickered weakly. You found it, she whispered, tears in her eyes. Now open it. With trembling hands, I opened the locket to find a small photo of her as a young girl. Instantly, the room lit up and the shadows disappeared. Thank you, she said, her voice clearer now. You've set me free. In a burst of light and warmth, Madeline's spirit rose from the portrait, smiling down at us before disappearing into the air. The room felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. As we stood there, catching our breath, I realized we had freed a trapped soul and connected with a piece of our family's history. The portrait stayed on the wall, but it no longer felt scary. It reminded us of the bond we had formed that Halloween night. It was a cold October night when I started my job as a night security guard at Greenwood Cemetery. The pay was decent, and I needed the money for my college tuition. When I arrived, the sun had just set, and the cemetery was quiet, with the old gravestones casting long shadows in the moonlight. It felt like a scene from a horror movie. On my first night, I felt excited but nervous. My supervisor, an older man with a serious look, gave me a thick logbook. Record anything strange that happens, he said, his eyes looking worried, and don't wander too far after dark. I laughed a little, thinking a cemetery couldn't be that scary. After settling into my small booth near the entrance, I opened the logbook. Most entries were boring, talking about raccoons and maintenance. But one entry caught my eye. It mentioned a shadowy figure seen wandering the tombstones. As the hours went by, the silence felt heavier. I listened to the rustling leaves and the wind howling through the trees, which made me uneasy. Suddenly, the radio crackled, startling me. Hey, is anyone out there? It was another guard. I think I saw something near the old mausoleum. My heart raced. I'm on my way, I said, trying to sound brave. With my flashlight in hand, I stepped into the graveyard, cutting through the darkness. As I got closer to the mausoleum, the air grew colder, and a thick fog rolled in from the trees. Hello? I called, my voice shaky. The only reply was my own echo. Just as I thought about leaving, a tall, dark figure stepped out of the shadows. My heart raced as I raised my flashlight, revealing a young woman with a pale face and a flowing dress. Help me, she whispered. I can't find my way home. Confused, I asked, Who are you? She didn't answer but looked toward the mausoleum with scared eyes. I didn't want to, but I followed her gaze, and suddenly the ground trembled, as if something was awakening. The air buzzed with energy, and whispers filled the cemetery. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. You shouldn't be here, I shouted, but she just stared at me with fear and sadness. The mausoleum door creaked open, revealing darkness inside. The whispers grew louder, calling me closer. The young woman took my hand, her cold fingers making me shiver. You must help me find peace, she begged. Before I could respond, the ground shook, and shadowy figures rose from the earth, their faces twisted in pain. I wanted to run, but the woman held on tightly. "Stay with me," she pleaded. I felt myself being pulled toward the shadows, unable to fight it. In that moment, I understood that the stories in the logbook were real. The cemetery was filled with restless souls trapped between worlds. Taking a deep breath, I yelled, "Let her go!" The shadows paused, hesitating as I gathered all my strength. The young woman's face softened, and she stepped back, slowly fading into the mist. "Thank you," she whispered as she disappeared. The whispers quieted, and the shadows retreated, leaving the cemetery in eerie silence again. Breathing heavily, I rushed back to my booth, the weight of what had just happened hitting me. I wrote everything in the logbook, knowing my experience would be part of the cemetery's haunted history. That night, I realized that working the graveyard shift wasn't just a job. It connected me to the mysteries of life and death. As I left the cemetery in the early morning light, I felt a sense of purpose, knowing I had helped a lost soul find her way home. One autumn evening, I found an old photo album in my grandmother's attic. Curious, I opened it and saw sepia-toned pictures of family gatherings, birthdays, and holidays. But as I turned the pages, I found something unsettling. Photos of people I didn't know, their faces twisted in fear and despair. "Who are these people?" I asked my grandmother, who had just come into the attic. Her face turned pale when she saw the images. "They were my friends long ago. They disappeared one Halloween night." A chill ran down my spine. "What happened to them?" "They went to the old mill on the edge of town because they heard strange sounds," she said, her voice shaking. "I warned them not to go, but they didn't listen." I wanted to find out what really happened, so I gathered my friends and headed to the mill, feeling the weight of my grandmother's story on my shoulders. The path to the mill was dark and overgrown, making the air feel heavy with anticipation. As we got closer to the rundown building, the wind howled, sending shivers down my spine. We stepped inside, our flashlights flickering against the damp walls. The air felt stale, filled with whispers that echoed off the old beams. "Do you think the stories are true?" Sarah asked softly. "I have to know," I replied, flipping through the pages of the album for clues. Suddenly, a photograph slipped out, showing a girl I recognized. She had been in several pictures, but her expression grew more desperate with each page. "Look at her eyes," Jake said, his voice trembling. "She's trying to tell us something." Just then, a cold gust of wind blew through the mill, and the whispers grew louder, forming words. "Help us, find us." My heart raced as I followed the voices, leading us to a hidden staircase. We went down into the darkness, and the air felt heavier with every step. At the bottom, we found a hidden room filled with old belongings. A diary, a locket, and remnants of a long-forgotten celebration. I opened the diary, and the pages told the last moments of my grandmother's friends, stories of laughter and joy turning to fear when they realized they were not alone. "The mill is cursed," one entry warned. "If we don't leave, we'll be trapped forever." Realizing that we were not just uncovering their past, but also living it, I turned to my friends. "We need to set them free," I urged. With new determination, we read aloud the last entry, promising to share their story so they would not be forgotten. As we finished, the room erupted in bright light, and the whispers turned into sighs of relief. One by one, the figures of my grandmother's friends appeared, their faces now peaceful. "Thank you," they whispered, before dissolving into shimmering lights that filled the room. When we left the mill, we felt lighter in our hearts. The haunted photo album now held a story of resilience and hope, a reminder that even the darkest tales could lead to freedom. This happened a few years ago on Halloween night when I was staying in a hotel with my best friend, Emily. It was the second night of our trip, and we had decided to stay just outside the city because it was cheaper. The area around the hotel seemed nice. Late that night, we wanted to go to the gas station for snacks, but then Emily's boyfriend called her. They started talking, so I went on my own. The hotel was surrounded by a few closed businesses, and the gas station was the only place open. I left the hotel and walked down the sidewalk to get there. It took about 5 minutes, and I didn't see anyone else outside. When I got to the gas station, there were maybe 10 people inside. The store was a bit larger than most gas stations and had a huge selection of snacks and drinks. I spent about 5 to 10 minutes picking out my items and then checked out. Inside, nothing seemed out of the ordinary and no one looked suspicious. However, just as I left, I heard the door open behind me and someone came out. I didn't think much of it at the time. Once I was back on the sidewalk, I noticed that the person was following me. I glanced back and saw a man wearing a gray sweatshirt and a winter hat. He kept walking behind me as I headed back to the hotel. The road was quiet and not a place many people would walk at that hour unless they were heading to the hotel. I started to feel nervous. When I reached the hotel parking lot, the man was still behind me. I went into the lobby and he followed me in. Trying to avoid a close encounter, I decided to take the stairs instead of the elevator. I thought that if he really was staying at the hotel, he'd probably take the elevator like most people. But he followed me to the stairs. As soon as I entered the stairwell, I let the door close behind me. Within seconds, I heard it open again. I knew the man was following me up. I quickly texted Emily, asking her to come to the room door and open it for me. Thankfully, she saw my text right away and agreed. I walked up the stairs to our room on the 3rd floor, feeling increasingly anxious. When I reached our floor, I let the stairwell door close behind me and heard it open again shortly after. The man was still following me. Our room was down the hallway, so I picked up my pace. I could hear his footsteps getting closer and closer, and I didn't dare look back. Finally, I saw our door open slightly, with Emily holding it. I walked even faster and slipped inside, slamming the door shut behind me. The door automatically locked, but I also secured it with the old-fashioned lock. Through the peephole, I saw the man walk right up to our door, then slowly walk away, only to return a few seconds later. When he did, he knocked on the door. I wasn't going to answer it. I moved away from the door, and Emily, confused, asked what was going on. The man knocked one more time about a minute later, and then finally walked away for good. I explained everything to Emily, relieved that she was there to open the door for me. If she hadn't been there, I would have had to unlock the door myself with the key, which would have slowed me down and given the man a chance to catch up to me. I still don't know who that guy was or why he followed me, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't staying in our hotel.